The global political landscape is really undergoing a profound transformation right now, and a huge driving force. It's youth movements all across the world. This isn't just, a fleeting moment. We're talking about a fundamental, sustained shift in political engagement. You're literally witnessing a new generation of leaders stepping up, actively shaping the future. So our mission today in this deep dive is to really unpack how this generation is making such a big impact. We're going to explore their sometimes surprising origins, the diverse and often deeply personal motivations fueling them, plus the incredibly innovative strategies they use, especially with tech, and the very real impacts on policy, laws, public opinion. And of course, we have to talk about the formidable challenges they face too. Think of this as your shortcut to being genuinely well-informed on this vital topic. We'll have some surprising facts, those aha moments that hopefully make everything click. Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing a significant shift. It's sometimes called alter activism. And what's really key here is the emphasis on lived experiences and a powerful sense of connectivity among these young activists. They're increasingly taking the lead roles in public protest and advocacy across a whole range of critical issues, things like climate change, abortion rights, gun violence, you name it. And while the scale and maybe the tools feel new, youth they've always been agents of change. I mean, think about the Soweto riots back in South Africa, 1976. Students protesting instruction at Afro-accountants. The casualties were significant, and it wasn't just local. That resonated globally. Or look at Nepal. Youth and student groups have been central to democratic movements there since like 1951. They even forced a referendum on a multi-party system in '79. So these examples, they really show us that youth have consistently been at the vanguard of these big social and political transformations.
Right, so it has these deep historical roots, but what about now? What are the most pressing social political contexts fueling this current global surge? What's really lighting the fire for this generation today?
Well, top of the list, without a doubt, climate change. It's just paramount. It's driving hundreds of thousands of young people to mobilize. They absolutely understand that decisions made right now, in the next decade, will profoundly shape life for generations. And they're just not willing to settle for political sound bites or, tiny adjustments. They demand transformative change. And they're informed by the science, those reports showing a really narrow window to have global emissions. For them, it's basically survival. But it's definitely more than just the environment. Economic inequality, social justice, those are huge drivers too. You see young people, especially from communities of color, disproportionately hit by environmental racism. Higher exposure to pollution, related health issues. So for them, the climate movement is completely linked with racial justice. It's an anti-racist act. And then you layer on economic factors, income disparity, sky-high housing costs. That fuels anger. We saw that very clearly in Hong Kong, didn't we? Where young people feel increasingly locked out of opportunity.
So it's not just one thing. It's understanding how these issues weave together. Intersectionality, right? That creates a more holistic and arguably a much more powerful kind of activism that really changes how you view these movements.
Okay, let's look at some prominent examples that have really caught the world's attention.
Absolutely. First up, Fridays for Future, FFF. This global climate strike movement, it started back in August 2018. Greta Thunberg, just 15, started a solo school strike outside the Swedish parliament. And that simple act just sparked this international awakening. Millions got inspired globally. Their core demands are pretty clear: 100% clean energy, keep fossil fuels in the ground, help climate refugees, all aimed at getting policies in line with the Paris Agreement.
Incredible impact from one person initially, truly. Then there's Black Lives Matter, BLM. It started, you might remember, back in 2013 as a hashtag Black Lives Matter, after Trayvon Martin's acquittal. Gained major prominence in the US around 2014 after Michael Brown and Eric Garner's deaths. And then it became truly global after George Floyd's death in 2020. Their mission: eradicate white supremacy, build local Black community power, combat violence, and importantly, foster Black creativity and joy. Their vision is for a future fully divested from police, prisons, and all punishment paradigms.
A very clear, very transformative vision.
Yes. Hey, we should also talk about the Hong Kong protests from 2019-2020. Those were primarily kicked off by those proposed legal changes allowing extradition to mainland China. That raised huge fears about due process, losing Hong Kong's autonomy. But underneath that, there were long-standing demands for democratic reform, especially universal suffrage. And those economic grievances we mentioned: income disparity, housing prices, huge issues for young people there. They had 5 key demands: withdraw the extradition bill, retract the riot label, drop charges against protesters, an independent inquiry into police force, and genuine universal suffrage.
5 clear demands.
Exactly. And what's really fascinating, as you said, is how these grievances are rarely isolated. They're deeply interconnected. That intersectionality concept,
The climate crisis, for instance, isn't seen in a vacuum. It's tied to social injustice, economic inequality. Similarly, Hong Kong, triggered by the extradition bill, yes, but rooted in economic issues and demands for democracy. It really highlights a crucial point. Effective policy responses have to be holistic. They need to address these interwoven issues together.
That makes perfect sense. But it also brings up this apparent paradox. We often hear that young people globally are disillusioned, maybe even fatalistic about the political system. You know, unstable economies, high living costs, deep distrust in government. Yet at the same time, they're showing this unprecedented mobilization. How do those two things fit together? Is it apathy or something else?
Did a really critical distinction. And what's so insightful here is how this disillusionment, it isn't actually leading to apathy. It's leading to a redefinition of political engagement. Their lack of faith in, let's say, formal politics, formal elections, it seems to compel them towards direct, informal activism through civic spaces. For many, direct action just feels like the only real option when the formal channels seem unresponsive or maybe even corrupt. So what might look like disillusionment from the outside is actually arguably a very savvy, strategic choice. They're finding the most effective ways to push for change, often outside that traditional system.
That's a fascinating reframe.
Yeah.
A proactive stance, not passive at all. So if this profound passion and intense frustration are the core drivers, how are they actually making their voices heard? Shaking things up. What are the novel methods these movements are using?
Well, the core motivators are definitely powerful. There's this profound passion for change, a real desire for a better future. Young people are deeply invested in the world they'll inherit, right? And they're just unwilling to tolerate an unjust status quo. This is coupled with intense frustration. They're, quote, unimpressed with political sound bites and platitudes. They refuse to settle for less than transformative change, especially on climate, where they really feel older generations have failed them. Research also talks about socio-political synergy. Basically, activism is more impactful when youth have high levels of interest, knowledge, and are actively involved. Personal connection and identity are also huge. If they feel personally connected to social injustices, or if activism is tied to who they are, they're more motivated. They also look for sanctuary, these protected, affirming spaces and support from adults, from peers. That's vital. And from a psychology angle, there's self-determination theory. It suggests motivation is sustained by three things: autonomy, freedom to express themselves; competence, believing they can actually make a difference; and relatedness, that feeling of love and support. So it's not just passion. It's this deep belief in their own agency, plus the support they get, that keeps them going, even when things get tough.
That makes so much sense. It's about empowerment, believing their actions count, and having that space to act. So with all that driving them, how are they translating that passion into action, making their voices heard in ways that really generate impact?
They're incredibly innovative in their approach. Social media campaigns, digital organizing, these have become absolutely central. Platforms like Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube. They're critical for getting information out fast, organizing collective action, mobilizing support. They basically bypass traditional media gatekeepers, letting grassroots movements get global visibility almost instantly. We even see dedicated apps popping up like TurnUp, designed specifically as social media spaces for civic engagement.
Wow, dedicated apps now too.
Yeah, but it's not all online. Protests and direct action are still fundamental tactics: strikes, marches, sit-ins, civil disobedience. Young people often prefer these informal routes over, say, joining a political party or just voting. And they're incredibly creative about it too, integrating art, music, performance, digital storytelling, compelling videos, infographics. It's all about humanizing complex issues, making them accessible, making them emotionally resonant.
It's clear technology and social media have this unique power here. How has that really reshaped youth activism? What are the benefits, but also what's the downside? What are the risks?
Oh, they're absolutely essential tools. Communication, mobilization, awareness, vital. These platforms give them spaces for debate, for organizing. They link online discussions with offline actions really effectively. That creates visibility, impact. And the accessibility lowers barriers. More diverse groups can get involved. Crucially, social media amplifies voices and builds that cross-border solidarity. Think about #FridaysForFuture. #Black Lives Matter. They perfectly show how social media can build solidarity across nations, connecting communities instantly.
But there's always a but, isn't there?
There is. This pervasive use of digital tools, it's a significant double-edged sword. While it's efficient, it can worsen existing digital divides. Some young people get left behind. More critically, digital activism is highly vulnerable to surveillance, harassment, repression by state actors. Governments are using advanced tech license plate readers, drones, facial recognition, sophisticated social media monitoring to identify, track, and suppress activists. AI systems, too. While useful for activists, they can also be weaponized for surveillance or manipulation by authoritarian regimes. Huge threats to privacy and security. This creates a chilling effect. People self-censor. Trust within activist communities erodes. We also see mental health impacts, increased depression, anxiety risks for those online over 3 hours daily, and there's a digital activism gap. Working class groups might face higher costs to participate online.
So that preference for informal action, like protests, it's not just youthful energy.
No, not necessarily. It can be understood as a strategic adaptation. It links back to rational choice theory. Basically, when formal avenues, political parties, voting are seen as unresponsive or corrupt, informal methods just offer a more effective pathway. It's a calculated choice, in a way, and it's redefining what political engagement even means in the 21st century.
So these digital tools enable this unprecedented mobilization. Yet they simultaneously provide sophisticated means for state suppression. It really does highlight this continuous, high-stakes strategic contest, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. The digital landscape isn't just a tool for these movements. It's really become a battleground for civic space itself. I mean, social media, secure messaging apps like Telegram, online petitions, crowdfunding, even those mobile apps, they provide crucial functions. Awareness, coordination, fundraising, they enhance effectiveness. But every single one comes with significant risks: surveillance, harassment, misinformation, digital divides, privacy threats. It's a minefield. And AI, while it offers ways to refine strategy, predict trends, it can be weaponized by regimes for surveillance, manipulation, adds algorithmic bias, more privacy threats. So yeah, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the digital landscape isn't just a tool. It's a critical battleground for the future of civic space globally.
That's a powerful way to frame it. Okay, so after all this innovation, the strategic engagement, what are the tangible impacts? What are we actually seeing from these youth movements? And I guess, what kind of resistance are they hitting in return?
They've definitely achieved demonstrable impacts, both historically and recently. Think back. Youth were pivotal in the U.S. civil rights movement. That led to legal protections for black voters, dismantling segregation. Anti-war protests, often student-led, were critical in challenging things like the Vietnam War. More recently, Fridays for Future, they successfully pressured governments globally. The EU's Green Deal, aiming for carbon neutrality by 2050, that's partly a direct response to their sustained pressure. In Germany, FFF influenced 46 cities to declare climate emergencies. South Korea's constitutional court even ruled their climate measures insufficient. That set an important legal precedent.
Wow, okay, real policy shifts.
Exactly. And Black Lives Matter. Profound impact on police reforms. It significantly shifted public opinion on race and policing. That opened a policy window for changes: bans on chokeholds, no-knock warrants, better data collection, duty for officers to intervene. Cities like Austin, Los Angeles, they restructured budgets, pledged to cut police funding, reinvest in community programs. BLM also influenced corporations. An estimated $50 billion pledged towards racial equity initiatives, more black representation on S&P 500 boards. And beyond policy, FFF strikes demonstrably changed habits, transport, buying, recycling among a third of Swiss citizens. BLM normalized filming black pain, shifted public opinion. 54% of white people came to see officer-involved shootings involving black people as potentially systemic. These are not small shifts.
Those are undeniably significant victories, huge shifts in some cases. But for every success story, it feels like there's a setback, right? A wall these movements hit. How do they maintain momentum when the system seems so well entrenched?
That's a critical point, because despite those wins, yeah, there have been major setbacks. For instance, the Comprehensive Justice and Policing Act of 2020 in the U.S. broad support, but it failed in the Senate. In Hong Kong, yes, they got the extradition bill withdrawn initially, huge success. But the broader demands for universal suffrage, ignored, and that ultimately led to the imposition of that draconian national security law in June 2020, and then Article 23 later, effectively dismantling freedoms, criminalizing peaceful acts, widespread suppression. And it's also worth noting, a significant chunk of those corporate pledges made after BLM still undispersed.
Right, those setbacks really underscore the truly formidable challenges these movements face. Beyond specific laws failing, what are the biggest systemic obstacles? What really stands in their way?
The challenges are immense. First, you have widespread institutional resistance and apathy. Governments often resist change. They fear economic impacts, loss of political power. It can look like dismissive attitudes, outright opposition, or just failing to follow through on demands. Youth movements are often directly confronting these entrenched political elites. Then there's the risk of co-optation or manipulation. Movements can get absorbed by established interests, which undermines their autonomy, or influential young individuals get co-opted. Plus those paternalistic views that just trivialize youth engagement that hinders them too.
Institutional inertia and manipulation.
Exactly. Then there are internal conflicts, lack of unified leadership, resource constraints. These are significant hurdles. Many youth movements are ideologically diverse, lack formal structures. That can make it hard to sustain a collective purpose. They often face inadequate resources, rely on old networks which might clash with their goals or limit their reach. But one of the most severe challenges is direct government repression and surveillance. States are increasingly cracking down on protests preemptively and violently. Mass arrests, physical violence, restrictive laws, protest bans, mask bans, censorship. The Hong Kong National Security Law and Article 23 are just stark examples. Severe punishments, denial of bail, even applying it extraterritorially against activists overseas.
That's terrifying.
It is. And the digital age adds digital surveillance and its chilling effect. Governments deploy advanced tech. We mentioned license plate readers, drones, facial recognition, social media monitoring to identify, track, suppress activists. This creates a powerful chilling effect. People self-censor out of fear, trust erodes within the activist communities, and AI systems can be weaponized for surveillance or manipulation too. Finally, the immense pressure, the risks. It takes a huge toll on mental health. Burnout is a major concern. Activists face harassment, arrest, violence, even death. The constant backlash, the pressure of being the savior generation, the slow pace of change, it contributes to higher rates of depression, anxiety, even vicarious trauma.
Wow. It paints a picture of a real asymmetry of power.
A profound asymmetry, yes. The more effective youth movements are at challenging the status quo, the more likely they are to trigger a disproportionate, severe response from authorities. Hong Kong is that clear example again. Initial victories met with the NSL systematically dismantling freedoms. It creates a high cost of success for these young activists, legal persecution, physical harm. And this leads to what some call the normalization of repression, where legislative measures are designed to fundamentally alter civic space itself, criminalize peaceful acts, and just instill fear as a permanent feature.
Which raises that crucial question.
Exactly. How do movements even sustain themselves against such overwhelming odds? And what does this power dynamic mean for the future of civic space?
That really is the million-dollar question, isn't it? So as we look ahead, what does the evolving landscape suggest? Future directions? Long-term sustainability?
Well, we can likely expect continued growth. Youth activism probably isn't going away. It might even increase, driven by factors we see now. Past protest levels, rising food prices, declining youth life satisfaction, increasing urbanization. Young people seem poised to stay at the forefront. A key trend will definitely be the increased integration of AI and data analytics. These tools can enhance effectiveness, automating tasks, predicting trends, improving content distribution. But we have to keep stressing the ethical implications and that risk of weaponization by authoritarian regimes.
Right, the double-edged sword again.
Precisely. In context with severe repression, we're likely to see a tactical shift towards less visible forms of activism, like in Hong Kong, where mass protests are basically banned now. Expression might increasingly happen through private remembrance, informal gatherings, discrete digital spaces. And there's this growing emphasis on lifestyle politics, where youth cultures redefine activism through personal choices, opting for sustainable products, reducing their carbon footprint. And through creative expression, it's a more subtle, pervasive form of activism, building momentum from the ground up.
That's a fascinating evolution, adapting to the environment. Given these huge challenges, how critical is intergenerational collaboration for long-term sustainability? Can they really do it alone?
Oh, it's absolutely critical for longevity. Young activists can learn so much from the experience, the knowledge, the resources that older generations bring. It facilitates vital knowledge sharing, allows them to build on past successes, develop more nuanced, effective approaches. The UN, for example, actively encourages intergenerational collaboration on climate action. They recognize its power. And there's growing awareness of the need for meaningful youth involvement in leadership. Not just token gestures, but real consultation, co-leadership, embedding them within organizations, ensuring their voices are truly central.
Okay, so collaboration is key. Beyond that, what specific strategies are crucial for building genuinely sustainable youth movements in this really complex landscape?
A few elements seem critical. Funding models and resource allocation, that's paramount. Youth-led movements often face huge constraints. There are initiatives now like Global Youth Mobilization, the Youth Action Fund. They provide grants, advising specifically for youth-led projects. Equally vital is addressing burnout and providing mental health support. We talked about the immense pressure. So, fostering strong support teams, promoting self-care meditation, exercise, boundaries with social media, and encouraging professional help when needed. That's essential for longevity.
Taking care of the activists themselves?
Yes. And finally, organizational resilience. That means maintaining a clear message, rotating leadership so you don't rely too heavily on a few individuals, adapting tactics to changing circumstances, fostering open dialogue to manage internal conflicts, and building diverse coalitions and alliances to broaden reach and impact. The future really seems defined by this need for adaptive resilience, especially facing escalating systemic pressure. Agile movements will have to pivot tactics maybe from mass street protests to digital advocacy, or from overt political demands to more subtle lifestyle politics. And that resilience gets significantly boosted by external support systems, funding, mental health resources, experienced adult allies. We're also seeing this increasing professionalization of activism, dedicated funding, strategic advising, leadership programs, even integrating AI. Now, this can enhance effectiveness, sustainability, but it carries risks too, diluting grassroots energy, creating new hierarchies, maybe introducing external agendas. There's this inherent tension between that raw passion and more strategic organization. That will be a defining feature going forward.
So, putting it all together, what does this mean for youth participation on a global scale? How do we even measure where we stand? What does the data tell us about the gaps?
Yeah, that's where something like the Global Youth Participation Index, or GYPI, is really useful. It gives us a data-driven overview across, I think, over 141 countries, a clearer picture. The average score, 60 out of 100. That indicates a significant global participation gap. And what really stands out are the lowest scores. Formal political affairs, just 50 out of 100. Elections, 51 out of 100. These aren't just numbers, they show a stark reality. Despite all their incredible mobilization, young people are still largely locked out of the very political structures meant to represent them. Civics-based scores a bit higher, 61. Socioeconomic participation is highest at 76, but there are big disparities between countries.
So the areas where they have the least formal power.
Exactly. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the GYPI really serves as a powerful call to action. The data clearly shows where the gaps are, how much more room there is for youth to truly shape their world. It really underscores that democracy remains incomplete as long as young people are underrepresented in the institutions governing their lives.
That's a powerful call to action, definitely. Okay, so to recap our deep dive here, youth movements are clearly this powerful, evolving force, rooted in what we could almost call a crisis of inheritance. They're leveraging innovation, especially digital tech, but facing that double-edged sword. Empowerment versus surveillance and repression. And their tangible impacts, when they achieve them, are often met with these disproportionate state responses, leading to this worrying normalization of repression.
Precisely. And their future really depends heavily on that adaptive resilience, strong support systems, and meaningful intergenerational collaboration to sustain these critical efforts.
So here's a final provocative thought for you, our listener, to consider. Think about this ongoing strategic contest between activist innovation and state control. How is the normalization of repression not just suppressing current movements, but fundamentally reshaping the very spaces available for future generations to express themselves and fight for change?
Yeah, and that raises an important question for all of us, really. What part will you play in supporting this evolving force for change and in ensuring democratic vitality for generations to come?
We really encourage you to reflect on the motivations, the strategies, the impacts, the challenges we've discussed today, and maybe learn more, explore resources supporting youth-led initiatives, advocating for their rights, fostering that intergenerational collaboration. This isn't just about them, it's truly about all of us shaping our collective future.